Good day everyone, I am Chloe Angie Palma and today I'm going to review the book or the 8th edition book of The History of the Filipino People by Theodore A. Agoncillo. Theodore A. Agoncillo was not just an ordinary historian who simply lists names and dates. He was a pioneer of the nationalist historiography. Before Agoncillo, Philippines history was once called as colonial history because it centers on the Spaniards and Americans' doings in our islands. But in this 8th edition of his masterpiece, History of the Filipino People, Agoncillo reinforces his life mission, which is to tell the story of the Philippines through the eyes of the Filipino people. This edition is particularly important and significant because it was finalized after his death, restoring his original, uncompromising prose and including chapters that were once suppressed by the political censorship. One of the most controversial things that Agoncillo said is that the Philippine history didn't even start until 1872. He argues that before the Kumburza priests were executed, we were just a bunch of separated groups living in different islands. To him, that tragedy was the spark that made everyone realize that we are all Filipinos. It's a pretty bold take considering that most books start with Magellan in 1521. But according to Agoncillo, Magellan is Spain's history, not ours. And our history started when we actually felt like a nation. So this book is actually divided into different parts. We have the pre-colonial, the Spanish, the Revolution, the Japanese and American years, as well as the modern era. So for the pre-colonial, he spends his time showing that we weren't just savages before the Spanish got here. So he talks about how we had the barangay system, different social classes like Maharlika, as well as our own writing system like the Baybayin. So he basically proves that we already had our working civilization before Magellan has found us. In the Spanish era, instead of just talking about the priests and the governors, he actually looked at why our early rebels failed. He says that it is not because we couldn't fight, but rather because we are only fighting for our small towns and not for the whole country. Next is the Revolution, which is the best part of the book. This is where the book gets really intense. Agoncillo is a big fan of Andres Bonifacio. He calls the 1896 revolution a revolt of the masses. He argues that while the rich, educated ilustrados were just trying to talk it out with Spain, it was actually the common people who actually got their hands dirty to fight for real freedom. For the Americans and the Japanese years, he was actually pretty harsh on the Americans. He thinks that their educational system was just a way of miseducating us to make us like Americans' culture more than our own. He also covers the trauma of the World War II and the guerrilla fighters who stayed in the mountains to fight the Japanese. Lastly is we have the modern era, which goes all the way to the post-war years. It talks about the continuing crisis, which covers the corruption and the political mess, which eventually leads to the EDSA revolution. So what is the significance of the book History of the Filipino People by Theodore A. Agoncillo? So this 8th edition of the book is its definitive version because of its unfiltered nature. Historically, Agoncillo has to share its authorship and has to tone down its critics because of the political climate in the 1970s. This edition, however, restores the continuing crisis, which takes a hard look on the post-war republic and the social unrest leading into the 1980s. It reads less like a dry book and more on like a literary epic. Agoncillo's background as a poet and a short story writer shines through. His descriptions of battles and political betrayals are cinematic and emotionally charged. So what are my final reflections about this book? While some other scholars and readers criticize it for being too centered in Luzon, leaving Visayas and Mindanao, it is still a book that is essential for reading. It serves as a mirror of the Filipino identity. It forces the readers to confront the uncomfortable truths about class divisions and long-lasting effects of colonization. In conclusion, this 8th edition of History of the Filipino People is not just a record of the past. It is an invitation to national self-awareness. It teaches us that history is a weapon, and in the hands of the people, it can be used to reclaim a stolen identity. Whether you are a student, a citizen, reading Agoncillo is a rite passage for anyone who wants to truly understand what it means to be a Filipino. And that ends my book review about the History of the Filipino People by Theodore A. Agoncillo. I hope that this review eagers you to read not just this specific book, but also his other publishes. That is all, and thank you so much for watching.